There is a version of you that said you would never be like this. You had a clear picture of who you were. You knew your values. You knew what you would and would not do. And then, slowly, without any single dramatic moment, you looked up and realized you had become something different. Maybe harder. Maybe more anxious. Maybe more cynical than you ever wanted to be. Maybe you started caring about things you once found shallow. Maybe you stopped caring about things that used to feel essential. No one forced this on you. And yet here you are. The strange part is not that people change. The strange part is how invisible the process is. You never signed a document agreeing to become this version of yourself. You never chose it deliberately. It just happened, one small reaction at a time, one repeated pattern at a time, until one day the pattern was you. The Buddha noticed this more than 2,500 years ago, and what he saw was not comforting. But it was precise. It was so precise that when you look at it closely, you may feel that he was describing your own mind from the inside. The teaching is found in the Anattalakkhaṇa Sutta, the Discourse on the characteristic of non-self. It was the second formal teaching the Buddha gave after his awakening. He was addressing 5 companions who had dedicated their lives to spiritual practice. And what he told them was this: the thing you call yourself is not one solid, unified thing. It is an assembly. It is 5 heaps of process stacked together, each one moving and changing and feeding back into the others. And none of them, not even one, is truly yours in any permanent way. He called these 5 assemblies the Khandhas. In plain English, they are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Form is your body and your senses, the eyes, the ears, the sensations in your chest when someone criticizes you or compliments you. It is the physical platform on which everything else is built. Feeling, or Vedana in Pali, does not mean emotion. It means the raw, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral tone that arises the instant anything is experienced. Before you even think about something, the mind has already tagged it. This feels good. This feels bad. This feels neither. That instant tag is Vedana. Perception, or sana, is what names and recognizes. It is the mental function that says, this is a face I know, this is a threat, this is something I have seen before. It reaches into memory and pattern recognition and labels the world before you consciously examine it. Mental formations, the sankhara, is the largest category. It includes intention, habit, attention, will, emotional reactivity, courage, fear, greed, compassion, and dozens of other mental factors that shape how you respond to anything you encounter. The sankhara are what psychology researcher Paul Rosen at the University of Pennsylvania has studied under a different name: moral elevation, disgust sensitivity, emotional contagion. These are the grooves in the mind that determine how experience moves through you. And then there is consciousness, vijnana. Not a self, not a soul, just awareness arising moment by moment, conditioned by everything that came before it. The Buddha's question was simple: is any of these 5 things truly you? Can you control them completely? Can you say to your body, never be ill, never age, never tire, and have it obey? Can you say to your feelings, only be pleasant, and make it so? Can you say to your perceptions, see everything accurately, never distort, never project, never assume, and have it reliably do that? You know the answer. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. If you cannot fully control any of these 5, if each one of them is conditioned, dependent on causes, shifting in response to circumstances, then what exactly is the self that you are so committed to protecting, defending, defining, and becoming? The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, in his work on the constructed self, found something that echoes the Buddha's teaching precisely. The sense of being a continuous, unified self is not a fact about the brain. It is a story the brain tells, moment by moment, stitching together fragments of sensation, memory, emotion, and prediction into something that feels singular and stable. But the stitching is not the cloth. The narrative is not the truth. And this is why you keep becoming someone you did not choose to be. Because if the self is assembled, then it is also reassembled. And what it is reassembled from is experience, attention, and repetition. Here is how the process actually works. Something happens. Your feeling tone registers it instantly, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Your perception labels it based on past experience. Your sankhara, your habitual mental formations, fire in their familiar grooves. A reaction arises, you follow the reaction, and in following it you reinforce the groove. The groove becomes deeper. The next time a similar experience arrives, the same pattern fires faster, more automatically, with less gap between the trigger and the response. The Buddha described this as dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Each link in the chain conditions the next. Ignorance leads to formations. Formations lead to consciousness. Consciousness leads to contact. Contact leads to feeling. Feeling leads to craving. Craving leads to clinging. Clinging leads to becoming. And becoming leads to the particular version of yourself that keeps showing up, even when you wish it would not. The psychologist Roy Baumeister at Florida State University spent decades studying the self and found that people consistently overestimate how stable their character traits are. They believe they are being consistent when they are often simply repeating habitual patterns. The self feels stable precisely because the patterns feel familiar, and familiarity feels like identity. But the Tipitaka pushes further. It suggests that the core problem is not change itself. Every tradition accepts that people change. The core problem is that you have built a fixed idea of who you are, and you spend enormous energy defending that idea, even when the actual experience of being you is flowing and moving and shifting in ways that do not match the picture. When something challenges that picture, the sankhara fires in defense. You feel threatened, you react, you protect. And in protecting a fixed self that does not actually exist in the way you imagine it, you often do things that make you less like the person you wanted to be, not more. This is the counterintuitive heart of the teaching. The problem is not that you changed. The problem is that you believed there was a permanent fixed thing to begin with, and built your entire inner life around defending and maintaining something that was always already movement. Think of the last time you acted in a way that surprised you. Maybe you were kinder than you expected. Maybe you were crueler. Maybe you felt envy you did not want to feel, or fear you thought you had outgrown. In each case, what you were encountering was not some foreign invader. You were encountering a mental formation that had been quietly conditioning itself in the background, shaped by what you had repeatedly attended to, repeatedly consumed, repeatedly rehearsed in the mind. Attention is not passive. Wherever you direct your attention again and again, you are feeding something. You are deepening a groove. You are building a version of yourself, one moment of reinforcement at a time. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, with sustained attention on something, you become that thing. Not metaphorically, structurally. The cognitive scientist William James, writing in the 19th century, said something astonishing for his time. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. He had no access to the Tipitaka, but he had arrived at precisely the same mechanism. The self is not given, it is grown. It is cultivated. And it is cultivated by every small act of attention, every repeated thought, every pattern you rehearse in private. This is both terrifying and, if you let it settle, quietly freeing. Because if the self is assembled, it can be assembled differently, not through willpower and self-improvement programs and better morning routines, but through something older and simpler, seeing clearly what is actually happening in the moment it is happening, seeing the feeling tone arise, seeing the perception label, seeing the formation move toward its habitual response, and in that seeing, introducing a small gap. The Anattalakkhaṇa Sutta, the Discourse on the Foundations of Mindfulness, describes this as knowing the mind as it actually is, not as you wish it were, not as you imagine it is. But as it is, right now, in this moment, moving, assembling, reacting, craving, pushing, pulling, telling stories, what the Buddha was pointing at was not self-improvement. It was something more radical. It was the recognition that the one who wants to improve, the one who is trying to become a better version, is itself part of the assembled condition process. And seeing that, really seeing it, not as an idea but as direct observation, that seeing changes something at a level deeper than intention can reach. You are not fixed. You are not broken. You are not becoming someone unrecognizable. You are a river that keeps being shaped by its banks and also keeps shaping them. The question is not who you have become. The question is, right now, in this moment, what are you attending to? What are you feeding? What groove is deepening while you are not looking? Because the version of you that shows up tomorrow is not being decided in some future moment of great willpower. It is being assembled right now, quietly, in the texture of what you pay attention to, what you react to without pausing, what you rehearse without realizing it. So the next time you look up and wonder how you became this person, the deeper question is not, how did this happen?
The deeper question is, what am I assembling right now in the only moment that is ever actually happening?